Hey, Fanboy Nation.
This is your pal Daffy Duck, and you're watching.
We're watching
You're watching Fanboy.
Fanboy,
fanboy, etc.
Fanboy Nation.
Dot, I assume Tom.
This morning, I have the pleasure of speaking with the director of Hell Hath No Fury, that's coming to theaters on November 5th, and then on digital November 9th from Wellgo USA Entertainment. Jesse V. Johnson, how are you today?
I'm very good. Thank you for having me, Austin. I'm very, very happy to be here.
Listen, man, the pleasure is mine. You've taken a period piece that takes place in World War II. You have a female character that uses her feminine wiles in not an overly vixen type style in seducing her captors, but using her wits, using her cunning, using everything she has to escape her captors, and the unlikely heroism. You know, we have the VC French, we have the Nazis, we have everything else going on. America still has a very huge fascination with World War II because it is the last war that we actually won. And I don't care if people get mad at me for it. This is the one that we've been most successful with. We still make Nazis the villains in quite a few of our films. Is that something that also happens in the UK as well as continental Europe, that when they make a period piece, the Germans always have to be the villains, since, you know, they pick two wars with the entire planet?
We're in a period of history right now where people are very, very nervous about who they make the villain and whom they paint in a cliched way and whom they should vilify. And I think you either come up with a fictional stormtrooper who has no redeeming qualities whatsoever, or you choose someone from history who absolutely unequivocally cannot be protected, or you know, there's no argument, because we're in a very strange time. And I think the World War II Nazi soldier or SS soldier is someone that we keep going back to because he's such an inherently inhuman character. And this is for better, for worse. Drama looks for, you know, high stakes. It looks for larger than life characters, and so war films are popular and people like it. It's easy. It's, you know, it's almost like the infant cinema of the 1908, 1910, 19-teens, where you had cowboys literally dressed in white with a white hat, and the bad guys would be dressed in black with a black hat, so people understood what was going on. You know, they were silent films, obviously in black and white, so there was, you know, the subtleties were lost, and you actually had a character in white and a character in black, and that's, you know, you knew who you were rooting for, and it was easy. It was escapism, and it was easy to get into. You could come into a movie like that anywhere in the film, and you pick it up and know where you were. So there's always going to be that ease of storytelling if you choose Nazis to be your antagonist. And I think, you know, it's also a reflection of the time now, when, you know, there's a whole subcategory of people that we can no longer say are the bad guys, and quite rightly so. You know, Native Americans played the bad guys. Japanese were the bad guys in movies for a long time. And of course, we know so much more about what was going on, and we've learned history. You know, we've read history books and know the other side of the coin was pretty brutal, and what they had to deal with was unspeakable in many terms. The civilian Japanese, or the Plains Indians, or the Pueblo Indians, which was just awful. It was a massacre, you know, and it's not quite such easy drama to have them as the bad guys, and quite rightly so. Whereas the Nazis will remain, I think, forever the best bad guys to have in a movie. So I don't see it changing, and I don't think it's very different around the rest of the world. Especially not in Germany itself, where they obviously want to forget their past as much as possible, or make up for it. With our film, I felt with Hell Hath No Fury that it was going to be interesting to look as close as possible. I personally hate poorly drawn bad guys in movies or story or literature. I want to know what it was that motivated and what's going on behind the surface. Why did this guy make the life decisions he made, and for what reasons? How did he justify that? And I knew I needed a good actor for this one, and we found a guy called Daniel Bernhardt. I met him not too long before the picture, and he's a very, very, very talented martial artist and choreographer from the John Wick, Atomic Blonde, and he choreographed and played the bad guy in Nobody, the picture Bob Odenkirk film that did very, very well just recently. And I kept seeing him in these things. I knew him from the past. I had a significant meeting with him early on, which he doesn't remember. I went out to see them shooting rehearsals for Wolverine. And my friend was the second unit director on that, Garrett Warren. The second unit director is the guy that directs the action. I'm watching from the sidelines, and they're filming the fight scene on video cameras, to show to the director, which is what happens now in big movies, or in smaller movies as well. You shoot previs, they're called, which is free visualizations, so that everyone knows what they're doing on the day, and it just goes quicker and faster, and you don't have the arguing or the head scratching that often comes. And so they're shooting this huge preview with Wolverine fighting, I think it was 12 other stunt guys, and people are flipping all over the place. And I'm watching Wolverine, and I said to Garrett, who's that guy? He moves incredibly well. He's got a great face. And he said, oh, that's Daniel Bernhardt, the guy from the old martial arts movies. And so that was my first introduction to him. No ego, just absolutely one of the guys will get in there, incredible physical performer. And then I met him just before the COVID sort of pandemic hit, and had a wonderful 3-hour conversation. I don't know if you've talked to Daniel, but he's one of the easiest human beings to talk to. And I realized there was a level of intellect there with regard to the acting that I enjoy. Acting is it's visceral and emotional, but it also requires a level of intellect. And I'm not talking about schoolboy intellect or homework intellect. It's just a knowledge of people, a knowledge of the business, and a knowledge of what you're doing. Because an actor, as well as playing that part, has to maintain a continuity throughout the whole film. And you film in different blocks. And I look for a certain level of person that I like to work with, and Daniel definitely had that. And so while we were casting this, obviously because of the pandemic, I cast all people I'd worked with before, but I didn't know anyone who could play this very complex, very difficult character, in my opinion, von Bruckner, who's the SS officer, who we know has a past with Marie, but we also know that there may be a emotional connection there as well, and it becomes very complicated. And I knew I needed someone who could convey that, and talk to Daniel. And of course, he speaks 3 languages: French, German, and English, which is what the character needed. So I brought him in, and it's probably one of the best decisions of my career. I think he does an absolutely incredible job of playing that part. And to answer your first question of conveying the complexity behind what we as audience members and historians and humans have been pre-programmed to think of as your textbook Nazi bad guy, wearing the black hat and rolling his mustache and trying to kill people at every. Listen, they were awful. They were repugnant. They were, and every single SS officer was aware of what was going on in the camps. There was no question. Every SS soldier probably was too. But if you were an officer within the Waffen SS or the political SS, you knew what was going on. So you are culpable 100%. There's a reason they were shot on sight. And so that makes it even more interesting. How do we make this guy sympathetic to the audience? How do we twist their head? How do we really screw with them? And you find someone like Daniel, who's just compelling and as good an actor and as handsome and as charming and as flamboyant. I mean, the guy's very, very good looking and fun to talk to. And how do you do that? And with the way that we confuse not only Marie, which is very, very important, but we confused the audience a little bit. And so that was a really big challenge, and I loved doing it. And I think Daniel did a great job and enjoyed doing it too.
No, you guys pulled something off that we weren't expecting, and I'm thrilled with what you were able to do. I got to talk to Dominic, and Dominic actually read us a poem, and it's very interesting to see the softer side of a Legionnaire that is able to convey that sort of emotional level that he has in this. And when you get to make movies of this caliber and be able to tell the stories, like, I always say, okay, the Nazis are always the villains in World War II, yet we never see anybody pick on Mussolini. We never see anybody pick on Stalin, in the way the films are made. And it's understandable, especially with the way Germany had behaved during that time period, especially in the early 20th century. But it would also be interesting to see something, coming out of Italy in that regard. but Daniel speaks multiple languages. Dominic speaks multiple languages. This is a very international cast that, you know, linguistically could have turned on you at some point where they could just start speaking French or Italian or Flemish or Dutch or whatever else behind your back and going, here we go, talking about you.
Yeah, they said, I guess they could. You mean a mutiny?
Yeah.
I'm always worried about that. No,
a verbal mutiny. And the reason why I say that is because, you know, Mussolini spoke 7 languages, and that's why the League of Nations hated him, is because he answered everybody in their own language.
Yeah, I love actors. I love the process of actors. Every once in a while, every movie, I try to put myself in front of the camera to remind myself how absolutely terrifying that role is and how magical the art of acting and performing really is. And I adore it. And I think actors sense that when they work with me. They sense my love for their profession. They sense my gentleness and the fact that I want to give them the room. And very rarely are there those sort of situations. Every once in a while you run into an actor who's got a lot of demons, but my job is to unravel that and work out what makes it tick. But with this cast, it wasn't really a factor because they all knew me and I knew them and had worked with them multiple times, with the exception of Daniel Bernhardt. So when we knuckled down and clicked into this, it was the most amazing group effort. You know, we were bubbled, not only cast, but crew had to bubble at this very, very remote location, which meant they slept there at night. The crew slept in cabins that were on the location, and then the cast slept up at the house, the ranch house, which was on the property. There was no internet. Cell phone was very, very choppy. You could drive, I think it's 4.5 miles and get a cell phone signal. But for the most part, we were bubbled in 1944, you know, and shooting in almost chronological order made it very easy for everyone to contribute in an incredible way to their cast. No one was going to the trailers. We had trailers for the cast, but no one was spending any time in there. We were spending the time on the set, talking with the other characters. What would we be doing? And when you make it a period movie, you know, like this, it forces you back in. Now, I did a lot of research when I did it. Obviously, Romain Serre, who wrote the script, you know, he's a French guy and wrote it with an awful lot of research from his part. But each step of the way, you know, from the technical advisors we had helping to the wardrobe people to the prop masters, it was a very concerted study, because you can't just make decisions based on a whim with a period piece. You know, they're having a romantic picnic. Okay, let's get them some sandwiches and some candy and a bottle of wine. It was 1944 or 1941, that section would have been in occupied France. You didn't have candy. They had sugared plums. That was the limit of what they had. There was not enough sugar to make candy from. There wouldn't have been white bread. There wouldn't have been jelly to put in the bread. There wouldn't have been sliced ham. The wine would have been of a certain, you know, and so you're forced every single decision. He jumps on a motorbike and gets away. Well, the motorbikes at the time took 3 or 4 different processes before you could kick the starter. You can't jump on it and ride away instantly. Things like that every step of the way you must research and do correctly. It's very, very important to me, because for me, that's part of the magic, not only of telling the story when the audience sees it, but also the magic that the actors go through to get into character while they're there. So I think they really love that kind of thing. I don't think they would have mutinied. It would have been I think they all knew there was something very special here, something rather magical. When we had the cast read through prior to shooting, it's a big table in a house and the actors are there. I think I brought along some of the steel helmets for the soldiers to wear. And I think I had one of the SS officers' hats for Daniel to sort of have a look at. And we read through the script. At the time, we were going to go with a different actress who was in Russia and would have required we were trying to get her out of Russia. And so I called Nina, who was a dear friend and who had read the script. We'd had a huge casting call for the script, which everyone wanted to do because it was a very good script. But the moment they realized I actually wanted to cut their hair and not wear a bald wig, that list of people became very short. List of actresses. So I called Nina and she came out to do the read through, and we did this read through. And when we got to that last sort of beat in the script, everyone was silent, and 2 or 3 of us were teary eyed. It was a very, very emotional beat. And when you have something like that happen, everyone realizes they're into something just a little bit special. And for narcissism or egoism or pure selfishness, everyone is wanting to do films that evoke that little extra emotion, that little extra something, because those are the ones that get noticed. They're the ones that grow legs. They're the ones that get sold. They're the ones that distributors want to put money into. publicizing. And when we had that moment at the table, that was the first of the significant sort of moves forward where everyone just invests just that little bit more of themselves into it. This cast gave their heart and soul for this movie. They put every ounce of their fiber into it. No one emerged unscathed. Scratches, burns, twisted ankles, various different stinging plants and insects that lived in these woods. Everyone to some degree paid with blood, sweat, or tears for the picture. Especially Nina and Dominic. Dominic, unfortunately, just seemed like a magnet for every possible physical gag that could go wrong went wrong with him. And it's terrifying because he's one of my dearest friends going 20 plus years back. We met on the first Mortal Kombat movie. I was an assistant director and he was a sort of day playing stunt actor. But he got hit in the face with a Zerk gun, which is the paintball gun, which fires a spark. It's a zirconium and a fish tank gravel inside a plastic 68 caliber sort of, and he was hit twice in the face with that, which was inexcusable. I've never seen that happen before, but it was just one of those strange, I think he got hit in the back of the head with a club that was, supposedly was the rubber one, but actually, silly little mistakes that when you're shooting quick happen, but he used all of that and sort of put it into it. And the scene where Nina slaps him was completely improvised. That I didn't read that at all, but she said she felt in that moment she needed to slap him to bring him into the scene and to bring his emotions to the surface. And she hit him quite hard. It was quite hard. She's but Nina's done bare knuckle fighting as well. She's a martial artist, and the tears were not from being hurt, but from engaging in the scene for Dominic. And it was, for me, that's one of my favorite bits of his acting ever, and anything he's done. It was quite an emotional process, this film.
Yeah, Daniel had mentioned that he was hit with that lead pipe by accident, and I was just like, and he was so nonchalant about it. I was like, yeah, well, I guess that's the Legionnaire aspect of who he is because of how tough they were. And thank you for letting me know about Nina, because I'm going to be talking to her on Monday, and I don't want to get on her bad side because I don't need any bare knuckle fighters getting mad at me.
Oh, but she's the most positive, creative, lovely soul you'll ever meet. There's not I don't think and I've known her 10 plus years. I don't think in the decade or so that I've known her, I've heard her say anything negative about anyone. I often try and push her for a bit of gossip and just see if she's getting, just for my own personal, sort of bloody mindedness, to see if she'll talk gossip, and she will not talk negatively about people. She's one of the most truly delightful souls I know. She's there was a moment on another film I was doing, I think it was The Debt Collector, where I needed some footage from a cow, a place where they butcher cows, and I knew that she had something to do with the whole what's the name of the group? I can't remember, but I knew she had something to do with the protesting towards slaughtering these animals for leather and meat. And I called her up and I said, "Do you have any spare footage that you've shot at any of these sort of slaughterhouses? Because I'd like to buy it off you to put into the movie. It's going to be used in a way that is, that amplifies your cause." And she said, she misunderstood me, bless her heart. And she said, "If you meet me, it's funny you call, it's the perfect timing. At 7:30 tonight, make sure you bring probably fatigues or camouflages, and maybe a ski mask is a good idea. Bring your video camera." And I said, "No, Nina, I don't want to come with you. I just want the footage." I said, I didn't hear anything, don't worry. And she said, "Oh, no, okay, I don't understand, I'm so sorry." But obviously she was going out on some sort of mission that evening. It's just like, oh my God, she not only talks the talk, but walks the walk. She's just quite a magnificent woman. She protests at plants where they kill all the geese and chickens, and I think she brought Joaquin Phoenix into her little world, and they, it's peaceful stuff. They stand in the road and sort of, offer water to the poor piggies that have been taken in, and there's just an awful lot of heart there. And I really truly love her as a human being, and even more so after having been in the fire pit of this movie with her, which was a hell of a shoot. One of the most physically demanding, but one of the most rewarding I've ever been a part of. And I hope some of that comes across. I hope when people see the movie, they see the effort and the group, sort of energy that went into making it, because it really was something special.
Right. Well, when Dominic told me that how limited the shoot schedule was, it was almost unbelievable because it seems like you had more time to make this film than you actually did.
Well, it was COVID, so the main unit was very short, and I knew it had to be short because we were losing Daniel to The Matrix Part 4, and we were losing Tim to Snowpiercer. So I knew that we had a very, very short window with the main actors. So it was designed with a minimal crew so that I could move extraordinary. There's no camera, there's no dolly, there's no tripods or cranes or anything like that. It was almost documentary style. It was shot listed, rehearsed, and planned extraordinarily well, but planned to shoot almost on the run as things happen. Now, having said that, it wasn't supposed to look documentary style, and I don't believe it is. It's very elegant photography, long takes that can take a long time where the actors work in front of us, but it was through preparation and rehearsing that was possible. But the main unit with the actors was one thing, which was very, very short. But what I had the luxury of with this film that I've not had before was coming back and being able to shoot additional footage, which is, and often it's that additional footage that resonates with the audience, saying, oh my God, how did they get that? And you're right, I sat in the field waiting for the sun to come up before I shot it, but I was there on my own with the cameraman, just the two of us. So I was able to shoot, or more days, additional footage than the actual main unit was. And when everything is joined together and edited together, it becomes a whole movie. But you're not normally given that kind of freedom to go off with this, with these splinter units. I do pretty much always do. I love my splinter units. That's where as I say, some of the best stuff in the movie comes from. That's where the richest and but you don't always, there's completion bonds and things like that often happen on the bigger films where no, you've got to be in the can and done by this date, and then you get 2 days to go off and do a couple of whatever shots of buildings and sunsets, and then that's it, baby. You're into the edit room, and that's fine. That's okay. That's you sign on at the beginning of a film, and that's what you do. But with Hell Hath No Fury, we had this luxury of being able to, the footage in Belarus was, with the soldiers, 300 Nazi soldiers in the tanks, and the shots of the sun coming up over the hills in the French countryside in Aubagne, which is where the film is set, going through stock footage for 6 months to find, what was amazing was I'd read about the reparations. Lee Miller, who's a wonderful photographer, she was a model for Man Ray, the photographer, before she went and volunteered to be a war correspondent. She's a beautiful woman. And she describes in her memoirs about how she was photographing she was marching through the streets, and because she was wearing she was photographing the Allied advance into France. So she's with the column. She looks a little bit like a soldier. And she said she was being hugged and kissed and welcomed and given bottles of wine. And literally in the same breath, those same people would hug her and kiss her and then turn and spit and beat and kick and on the people, men and women, that they felt had been collaborators. And she said it was such a fascinating study in human character, how someone could go from kissing and complimenting to insulting and berating within the same breath. And that always resonated with me. And I had read about the shaving of the head and the taking off of the clothing and being marched through the street in your underwear, having lipstick swastika painted on the forehead of these girls. And we did this and we filmed it. It was unpleasant to film. It was very, we had, I had a photographer, a woman photographer, who said it was the most awkward thing, most uncomfortable thing she'd ever had to watch on a set. Now, Nina knew what was going on, was acting, and was completely fine with it. But even Nina said it was to have your head shaved like that, to be held by 6 or 7 guys and have your head shaved, was one of the most awful things that she's ever had done to her on a film set. It's really a brutal thing. And we put this sequence in the movie, it's edited into the movie. And then as I was going through stock footage, and it probably over a few months, just bringing out more and more, because there's immense amounts of stock footage from World War II that's available to filmmakers. I found footage of a woman having the dress removed, being shaved, and having the lipstick swastika put on in the same manner that the one was applied in our movie. And I thought it was very, very, it was one of those funny, strange moments where, oh my God, we actually touched on what actually happened there. And I managed to buy that footage, and that footage is in the opening sequence of the movie but it's interesting though, it came after what we had created on set. It was a fascinating time, and I think it's a wonderful role for any actor to play, and I think she did a brilliant job.
Well, let's hope we don't end up in another situation like that in the next few years, if ever again.
It will. We're destined to repeat ourselves. If you study history, go back long enough, you'll see that we've done it all before. At some point, we're not a very smart species. We're a beautiful, incredible species that's capable of great grace and art, but we also have the yin to that yang. We have this ability to be self-destructive as well. But yes, I agree.
Jesse, I do want to ask, you've worked with so many of these talented people in various other projects. When you find your cast and go, this actor would be perfect for this character, this actress will be perfect for this character, and they had never worked together, but you had worked with them, being that bridge to connect them, is it almost a creation of anxiety within yourself of what if they don't get along with each other as individuals? We know they're professionals and that they'll work well together in their performances, but there's always tension once the camera stops rolling if they don't get along.
Yeah, every time. What we do is an inexact science, and there was someone who, Godard, one of those guys, said it's a series of happy accidents making a movie, and you're, as the director, if you are in control of the casting, and sometimes we're not, by the way, but if you're in control of the casting, and to a certain degree you're attempting a form of alchemy where you're putting two chemicals together and hoping there's some sort of a reaction that's interesting to watch, and that they don't try to throttle each other or hate each other. Or worse, they have an affair, and then the movie looks absolutely terrible because there's no spark left by the time you're rolling the camera. But you're like an old medieval wizard. You're trying to put this stuff together without really honestly knowing what's going to bubble and what's going to be great. And sometimes two people have something wonderful, but when you put them together, it almost cancels out. And you've got to be very careful. You try to create the environment where that's going to be most interesting to watch. At the end of the day, we're making interesting images with interesting performances, with interesting characters. Those are the sort of mandates that we have as a director. All the rest of the stuff, you just have to hope takes care of itself. You can only control it so much. But yeah, it's always a concern. You're never quite sure how two people are going to, or three people, or four, or five in this case, are going to trigger together. With Dominic and Charles Fadi in this one, the two French resistants, they were not Vichy French, they were full French resistance, de Gaullists. I knew I wanted someone with Dominic to help remind him how to be French, because he's a Belgian. He was in the Foreign Legion, where they teach you to speak French. You have to learn at an accelerated rate. But I wanted someone who was Parisian French to really remind him how the slang works, how they move, they move their hands differently when they talk, and the slang is different. And so I hired Charles Fadi, who's a traditional theatre actor. He played Picasso. The one-man show of Picasso won tons of awards doing it, and he was brilliant. He came in and really helped everyone with their French, and really sort of guided everyone. And then he also came in post and helped with the French that was being re-recorded for ADR. But the two of them together, I thought, worked really beautifully, with this sort of bickering, sort of arguing, and ultimate love between the two of them. But you never, like two brothers, you're never quite sure if they're going to hug or punch each other.
No, this is true, and it does make sense that there is always a bit of that tension. I do want to deviate ever so slightly to another film that you made, only because I didn't get a chance to speak with you about it. Triple Threat. I absolutely love that film of yours, and I just wanted to make mention of that because it is a phenomenal action martial arts movie.
Thank you very much. I worked very, very hard on that one. That was a blast to make as well. I love Thailand. I really, really enjoyed that cast, to tell you the truth. They were just great fun to work with. It was a joy, and the crew was good. It was hard work in the post, because they came and I delivered my cut of the movie, and they came and decided they needed a version that would be far more China centric. And so they took the film away and edited for about a year, and sort of, it was a fraught process, but by the end of it, people enjoy the film, and that's all you can hope for,
And I'm sure we'll get a director's cut at some point.
I don't know. It also introduced me to Wellgo, the distributor in the US, who I then returned to with Hell Hath No Fury, and who are fantastic. And the reason you saw Triple Threat was because Wellgo got behind it and pushed it and did a really good job of it. And I knew, and it's also run by women, Doris and Chrissy, who are really, really good. And they're based in Texas. And there's something about not being in Los Angeles that allows them to march to the beat of their own drum and sort of, they're allowed to make their own decisions based on what movies they like and feel will sell. And I just always knew I had something, there was going to be a reason to come back to them. And I was really, really happy when they let me know that they enjoyed Hell Hath No Fury, and that was going to be something on their docket. So very pleased to be there. And that was initially, that relationship was forged through making Triple Threat, so it was a good thing.
Well, I hope that you have a very long and lucrative career with your partnership with Wellgo Film USA, Wellgo USA Entertainment, and everything that comes with it, because Triple Threat was a lot of fun. Tony Jaa is amazing. Scott Adkins has always been gracious in tolerating my twisted sense of humor. Michael Jai White is no nonsense, but we have a couple of mutual friends, so he's always been great to chat with as well.
Yeah, cast are great. I love Scott. I love all those other guys as well. But Scott's a dear friend personally as well. We have many more films planned together, and when you make these films that are slightly on periphery of mainstream Hollywood, everyone does their very best, and we give up blood, soul, sweat, and tears. We have smaller crews, we have less money to play with, we have less schedules to play with, and we make these films. You put your soul into the picture. There's not a day goes by where you have a proper night's sleep. It's concern and worry and emotion, and you're trying to do this thing. And then you put your film out and you realize we're competing against pictures whose publicity budget on a studio pitch is 40 or 50 million at the lowest, and our films are made for a fraction of that, let alone what's, being paid to publicize it. It's not even in the same time zone. But then people are choosing between ours and that one, and in many cases they're choosing to see our film. And I think there's that's becoming a wider expanse, because these huge films just aren't triggering. They're just not getting the visceral emotional response that people want anymore. You have a room of 25 executives who are mulling over every single decision that's made, from clothing to the set, to the look of a particular visual effect. And each of the films is coming out looking more and more like the one that came before it. They could have been directed by any of 15 very, very capable directors, and they represent a form of entertainment. But I think there's a very big place for indie movie making, and I think for the actors that I work with, I'm just doing my very best to make sure that my films, my part of it, is as good as possible, and these guys get noticed in some way. But it's frustrating for Scott and I know, to try to make these pictures and try and get noticed. Hopefully with Hell Hath No Fury, we've crossed that a little bit, because it's such a popular genre, the World War II genre, and maybe where someone is choosing which film to see, and they have these $100 million films, they say, well, maybe a little World War II film might be an interesting, and maybe that's how you trick them in. But it's a very strange time. In the 50s, 60s, 70s, there was A movies and B movies, and you'd see the A movie and the B movie be following, and you knew exactly what you're getting into. Now everything's sold on the same platform, on Netflix or VOD, and you really have no idea, and other than what you can judge from that trailer. It's a fascinating time. It's interesting.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing,
my job as much as I can.
Absolutely. But if we go back to the 90s, where indie film was on its rise, its resurgence from the 60s and 70s, and had its rebirth in the 90s, the indie films kind of became the mainstream films, and they almost became cookie cutter in regards to what we're seeing now with the mainstream films.
Kinda, but indie films in the 90s was, early, they were still $5, $6, $7 million movies. But you couldn't make an indie film like you can now, because the cost of making a movie was just too much. Those were union pictures, things that people talk of now as being indie films from the 90s. They were simply films that were made outside of the studio system, and they were financed independently, and then they would be picked up in either a negative pickup or put out by one of the studio distribution arms. They were still big budget movies, but you could finance them if you were smart enough and if you got the right cast in them. They were making micro budget films in the early 90s, but they looked awful. They were really, really wretched. What happened is the cost of making a film went down. I know, you can make a film on a DSLR now with one other person. If you're smart enough about doing it, it could look like a big budget movie. That's the crazy thing. So now we have this micro budget level of movies that a handful of directors and filmmakers are able to do, work that looks like it's far more expensive than it was, but it isn't. You have a handful of actors that live in this world that are able to make $1.5 or $2 million back in international sales because of the value of their name. But it becomes very, very difficult to break out of that particular world and into the studio world because there's stigma attached to this back history of smaller films that you've done. And it truly is about stigma. They'd rather have someone who has no films behind them than someone who has 10 B or C movies behind them. And it makes sense. It's marketing, but it is an interesting time. It's a strange one. But hopefully we've broken that. I feel if you watch Hell Hath No Fury in the theater, in the way it was supposed to be seen, anamorphic, widescreen, there's not too much going on in there that gives away the fact that this is not anything but a regular budget-sized movie, and that's the magic. That's the magic trick. That's the little bit of that's the extra effort, the extra energy, and the extra time that goes into prepping it and shooting it.
Well, sir, you are a wizard in what you were able to pull off in the short amount of time that you had, with the cast that you have, in the script that you had.
Thank you very much, Chelsea.
Yeah. What would you like to tell people that, they're taking their hard-earned dollar, they have the competition of, the possibility of going back to the theater, or some of us that are lucky enough to have large screen televisions at home that gives us a home theater experience, to want to see either in the theater or on VOD while competing with some of the bigger films?
I would say see the movie. Don't judge it until you've seen it. There's an awful lot here, a lot of depth to the picture, and the characters all very, very rich. But if you have the chance, and it's in select theaters, do yourself a favor and see it on the big screen. As I say, it was shot with 1960s Cooke lenses in anamorphic, which is a form of film that compresses the film, and then it is decompressed when it's projected. It does something to the texture, to the very essence of the image. It was what they did to pictures in the 50s and 60s when they were competing with television. They wanted to give bigger and lusher and larger experiences in the theater to drag you away from your damn TV set, which was losing, theatrical attendance, and so we've done that. We've used that format. It's something rather special, rather magical. If you sit in the theater and you watch this with an audience, it's going to be unlike even the largest screen TV in your home. Although that is still fun and that is still good, I highly recommend seeing it with an audience on the big screen. We took as our guiding post. You look at World War II pictures, things like Saving Private Ryan and Band of Brothers. They were done beautifully, but over the last 20 years, they've been copied ad nauseum. That wobbly cam, the tilting the shutter and peeling the lens protection off. It's been done to the point now where it's pastiching itself. We went back further. You went back to the films. We said, which were the films you watched with Granddad on Christmas, on a weekend? The Great Escape, Kelly's Heroes, The Eagle Has Landed, Where Eagles Dare. All these were the pictures that really they had. There's a magic there. There's a magic that was generational, and it's locked in your cerebellum somewhere. So that when you see an image like this in the theater, it unlocks that warm memory, that comfort. And then we tell this rather disturbing story on top of that, which hopefully really resonates and has an effect. I have been told by the test audiences it really has something rather special in the third act, the last act of the picture. So see it for yourself, sit on the big screen, enjoy it that way. An awful lot of work went into it. A lot of artists, artisans, actors put their heart and soul into it, and that's the way to see it, I say.
Well, I love what you were able to pull off. This film is absolutely gorgeous. The story has multi-layers to it. Sometimes you don't know which way to look and who to feel sympathetic for, and I think that's the great aspect of storytelling, because you never want to feel sympathy for the villain, and in some instances, you're almost going, there's something in there that makes a little bit of sense to me that's bothersome, that it actually is appealing. Congratulations on this film. I absolutely love Triple Threat, so I need to make mention of that again so people can go back and watch that before they head out to the theater on November 5th to watch Hell Hath No Fury. And if they can't make it to the theater, still don't feel comfortable going out into the theater, at least on November 9th, they can watch it on VOD. And I'm thrilled that there's multi-options in order to see your film.
It'll be on DVD and Blu-ray as well. I've seen the Blu-ray covers. They will look pretty cool. So that'll all be accessible, but give it a shot. Wear your mask if you want, go see it at the theater if you get a chance.
I'm very much of a Blu-ray DVD type person. I like having the physical content in my hand. I also love watching the bonus features. So if there's a sneak peek bonus feature, maybe you could let us in on before I let you go.
I think there are. We had some wonderful stuff. I think it's a 2.5-minute one that shows a lot of the stunts and interviews some of the cast. But yeah, all that stuff has been given to Wellgo, so they have it. I don't know how much of it will go on the behind the scenes, but it's fun stuff. You know, it's like you're going on an incredible safari when you make a picture like this. In the 1940s and 50s, and prior to that, when you made movies, it was tents and it was multiple trucks, and they'd go out to locations that were 2-3 days away from the studio, and you'd live in this group of people and make this movie. You'd live the movie to a degree, and then you pack up and come back and you edit it. This is what happened with this film, and it's very rare. You don't get that opportunity much anymore. And I think it transfers, that commitment and that energy transfers itself to the screen. I think it helps with the performances. I think it helps with the way everyone's together, and certainly continuities help, because if someone bruised themselves on the first day, the bruise is there throughout the movie.
Jesse, I love it so much. Where can we find you on social media if we want to connect with you?
I'm Action Jesse B. Johnson. I'm on Instagram and Facebook there, so definitely come say hello. There'll be updates on the movie, on the screenings, on the DVD sales, behind the scenes, all that kind of stuff will be there. So certainly drop by. Perfect.
Thank you so much. Hell Hath No Fury from Wellgo USA Entertainment. North American debut, November 5th in theaters, November 9th on digital, coming soon to DVD, Blu-ray, Smoke Signal, any other way we can get it to you. You got to see this picture.
Thank you very much, Jesse. Really appreciate the time.